The Fire Within by Krista Lacy. We're on page 304. David returns. David walked in at 6:10. 3 hours had passed since his outburst in the gardens. He was shivering and his hair was dripping wet. The bottoms of his jeans were splattered with mud. One shoe was so soaked it squirted water over Boddington as the cat came to greet him. When he hung up his coat, it fell off the hook. At the second attempt, he sneezed so forcefully he sprayed half the mirror with the contents of his nostrils. By that time, Liz was in the doorway of the living room, arms folded, tapping her foot. She said nothing to David, just "towel" to Lucy as Lucy came pounding downstairs to see. Lucy asked no questions, just turned and went. David swept his hair off his rain-soaked brow. Sending a rivulet of water down his nose. "Went for a walk," he said rather timidly. "Through a car wash? By the look of it," said Liz, unimpressed. Lucy reappeared with a large bath towel, and she handed it to David. Her mother said stiffly, "Dry your hair, take off anything wet, then wrap yourself up in your blanket, clothed. You need to warm yourself slowly. I'll make you a drink." She walked into the kitchen and plugged in the kettle. David, knowing there was no point in arguing, squelched down the hall, toweling his hair. "Should I call Sophie?" Lucy called to her mom. David halted and looked at each of them. "We took her home," Liz told him. "Tell her he's back," she shouted to Lucy, "and there's no need to call every half hour now." She gave David a critical look. He shivered and went to his room. Shortly afterward, Liz came in with a drink, something fruity, billowing steam. She put it on his desk. And pulled the curtain hall closed, reducing the room to a softer light. David, under the blanket, as instructed, had Winston in his arms and Boddington nestling at the foot of his bed. "You're mad at me, aren't you?" he said. Liz sat on the bed with her hands in her lap. Concerned would be a better word. Getting soaked is bad enough at the best of times, but when you're not well and upset into the bargain. "I didn't mean about getting wet. I meant about what I said in the gardens. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have shouted like that." "Sit up," said Liz. Have your drink. It's honey and lemon. It'll help you clear your head." David shuffled into the sitting position. He cupped the mug in his hands and took a few sips. "You're a silly boy sometimes," Liz said gingerly. "Why did you go stomping off like that? Why didn't you just stay and talk to me?" David shook his head. "Don't know. It just happened." He put the mug down and sank back against his pillows, his head just clonking the wall. "When we buried Conker, I was really mixed up, sad and bitter, all at the same time. It seemed so unfair that he would go and die after everything Lucy and I had done. The whole thing seemed so pointless." Liz smoothed a crease in her skirt and said, "But can't you see how much you've achieved? You've brought joy and adventure to Lucy's life, and who knows what to the library gardens." "Conker's still dead." "No," said Liz. "He's alive in your story. And that's the greatest achievement of all. Conker helped you find something you never knew you had." "Yeah, that I'm useless at writing stories." David thumped a fist against Winston's body, making the old bear baa like a sheep. "What can I do for Lucy now? How can I end the story happily without, you know?" Fudging the truth? David sighed and ran a thumb down Winston's ear. I spent ages in the gardens thinking about it, and before you say it, I did try asking Gadzooks. Eventually, every time I pictured him, he looked so strange. He had his head bent low, and his tail was all droopy. The pages of his pad were peeling away. Where is he? David peered around, hamster-like. The pencil-chewing dragon was nowhere to be seen. Lucy took him upstairs, said Liz. Why? David's tone was hesitant and nervous. Oh, you know what children are like. Maybe she was feeling sorry for him being a stupid dragon and all. He's crying, isn't he? David said. He raised his head as if listening for the sniffles. I made him cry because the story didn't have a happy ending. To his surprise, Liz shook her head. Gadzooks would be a pretty poor authoring dragon if his flame was extinguished the first time he helped you with a sad story. Extinguished? David looked at her hard. Dragons are different than you and me, David. When they shed tears, they fall within. The tenant's face suddenly turned very pale. You mean Sophie was right? Crying really does put out their fire? Yes, Liz said. Without flame, they enter a deep, dark sleep, if their fire isn't quickly rekindled. No! David sat up, grasping the blanket. Liz, arms folded, sat quite still. He's crying because you rejected him, David. If you love him, his spark stays lit, remember? The tenant's eyes filled with hope. But I do love him. Really. Where is he? I want to see him. At that moment, Lucy slipped into the room. Sophie's coming over tomorrow, she reported. She says we've got to look after him. Puh. Tell me how to help Gadzooks, said David. It has something to do with that story, doesn't it? The one about the last true dragon in the world. I heard you telling Lucy when Gawain got broken. He came to the stream to drink, and Guinevere sung him a sort of lullaby. The Song of Guinevere, Liz said eerily, as Lucy began to faintly hum it, is the key to the heart of dragon legend. Are you ready to dream it, David? Yes, he said, pulling the blanket up to his chin. He slid down as Lucy's humming washed over him, closed his eyes, and took himself back to the distant time of fire-breathing creatures and cave-dwelling kin. Good, said Liz. For you and you alone can rekindle Gadzooks. Listen closely, David. There may yet be a time to save him. Now we're on page 311, The Fire Tear.